August 2nd, 216 BC, and the dry morning wind whispers across the Apulian plains, unaware of the history about to be written. In the quiet dawn, a Roman legionary fastens his bronze armor, preparing to become a small cog in the greatest war machine ever assembled. Across the field, Hannibal Barca emerges from his command tent, his mind already executing a masterpiece of tactical deception against impossible odds. Row upon row of pristine Roman helmets catch the first golden rays of sunlight, a terrifying ocean of iron waiting to be unleashed. Separated by the winding Aufidus River, the two massive encampments stir to life, as thousands of watchfires fade into the morning mist. The warm Volturnus wind sweeps through the dry grass, carrying with it the unmistakable, rhythmic, metallic clatter of the Roman gate swinging wide. Centurions march briskly down the lines, their sharp commands cutting through the heavy, disciplined silence of 80,000 waiting soldiers. Among the Carthaginian ranks, Celtic and Iberian warriors proudly display their ancestral shields, their faces set in a quiet, deadly resolve. Atop his great dark horse, Hannibal's gaze sweeps across the horizon, calmly measuring the vast distance between triumph and total oblivion. A crimson tide flows out from the Roman camp, an endless, blinding river of red cloth and polished steel pouring onto the plains. With every synchronized step, heavy boots strike the dry earth, sending plumes of pale dust drifting upward into the warming morning sky. From high above, the sheer, terrifying scale of Rome's power is revealed, forming into massive, impenetrable, rectangular blocks of absolute destruction. An unbroken wall of painted wooden shields snaps together, creating a curved, interlocking fortress of iron bosses and unyielding martial discipline. Consul Varro sits confidently upon his horse, fully believing that his blunt, overwhelming force will shatter the enemy in a single blow. A gilded eagle is hoisted high into the morning air, its golden wings catching the sunlight as a brilliant beacon of Roman supremacy. In response, Hannibal arranges his men into a formation never before seen. A bulging crescent, bowing outward toward the approaching Roman battering ram. In the very center of this vulnerable curve, Celtic warriors rest their heavy swords, watching the iron tide inch closer through the dust. This diverse brotherhood of Iberian swordsmen, Gallic warriors, and African spearmen stand united, trusting entirely in the mind of their general. The battlefield is set, the massive Roman rectangle driving straight toward the thin, highly unorthodox Carthaginian crescent waiting in the wind. To cement their courage, Hannibal dismounts and stands directly in the center of the line, risking his own life alongside his frontline men. Suddenly, 80,000 Roman voices erupt in a deafening, unified war cry, a sound that shakes the very foundations of the earth. The colossal Roman war machine takes its first synchronized step forward, creating a rhythmic tremor that pulses across the silent landscape. Pebbles vibrate and dance upon the dry dirt, betraying the sheer, overwhelming physical weight of the approaching Republican army. To the Carthaginians waiting in the crescent, the horizon is swallowed by a creeping, relentless wave of iron and bright red crests. Beneath a heavy bronze helmet, a young Roman soldier breathes through the sweltering heat, his eyes locked firmly on the enemy ahead. The legions march with mechanical precision, an unstoppable, synchronized engine of war that knows only how to push violently forward. As the wind quickens, thick clouds of yellow dust whip across the plain, partially blinding the advancing army in a hazy shroud. Carthaginian commanders raise their swords high, shouting last-minute orders into the rising wind, bracing their men for the catastrophic impact. Through the eyes of a frontline warrior, the massive Roman shields loom larger and larger, materializing like phantoms from the blinding dust. The empty space between the two great armies rapidly vanishes, shrinking from 100 paces down to a mere terrifying 50. In perfect, terrifying unison, thousands of Roman legionaries reach back and grip the wooden shafts of their heavy pilum javelins. The sky darkens as a massive volley of iron-tipped spears is launched into the air, momentarily eclipsing the fierce midday sun. The javelins crash down like metallic rain, their heavy iron tips violently embedding into painted wood, with a deafening, splintering crunch. A Celtic warrior braces his shoulder against the concussive force, his shield heavy with Roman iron. Yet he firmly holds his ground. For the final 20 yards, the Roman vanguard breaks into a terrifying, earth-shattering sprint, their shields lowered like immense battering rams. The two colossal armies finally collide with a monumental, thunderous crash, a devastating shockwave of bronze and iron rippling across the plain. Shields violently smash into shields, sending explosive plumes of dust, erupting into the air from the sheer kinetic force of the impact. The front lines dissolve into a grueling physical struggle, a terrifying test of leverage and endurance as men push with everything they have. Behind the Roman vanguard, rank after rank blindly presses forward, generating an unimaginable, crushing pressure against the Carthaginian center. Boots frantically slip and slide in the loose earth, muscles straining to the breaking point against the invisible, unyielding weight of the enemy. A sweeping Carthaginian sword strikes a polished bronze helmet in a shower of sparks, met instantly by a raised defensive Roman shield. Above the grinding sea of metal, the yellow dust swirls violently into the sky, mixing with the harsh, blinding glare of the sun. On the extreme left flank, Hasdrubal's heavy cavalry forms up in the thick dust, their powerful war horses stamping the ground with impatient fury. A majestic charger flares its nostrils and tosses its dark mane, its seasoned rider gripping a heavy wooden lance with deadly intent. With a sudden command, the Carthaginian cavalry accelerates from a trot to a thundering gallop, sweeping like a storm toward the Roman flank. Massive hooves tear into the dry Apulian earth, hurling immense clods of dirt into the air as the riders close the final distance. The cavalry lines clash in a chaotic, swirling whirlwind of rearing horses, shattering lances, and blinding dust on the edge of the battlefield. The sheer momentum of the heavy Carthaginian horsemen violently dismounts Roman riders, sending them tumbling backward into the choking, dusty haze. Overwhelmed by superior skill and heavier mounts, the Roman cavalry rapidly fractures, losing precious ground on the highly crucial flank. Back in the center, Hannibal pushes his shoulder against a shield, shouting fiery words of encouragement to his straining, exhausted frontline warriors. Under the crushing, unbearable weight of the Roman push, the Carthaginian center takes a deliberate, synchronized step backward into the dust. From above, the outward bulging crescent begins to flatten out, yielding to the incredible forward pressure of the dense Roman rectangle. Consul Varro smiles triumphantly from the rear, watching the enemy center bow backward, entirely convinced that his blunt strategy is winning the day. Eager to break the enemy, Roman legionaries abandon their strict formations, pushing frantically forward to claim what they believe is an impending victory. Advancing Roman boots march eagerly over discarded shields and shattered spears, pressing deeper and deeper into the heart of the Carthaginian lines. Through the chaos, a Carthaginian commander locks eyes with Hannibal, receiving a subtle, silent nod to continue the choreographed tactical retreat. The Carthaginian center pulls further back, reversing its shape entirely into a concave bowl that naturally funnels the attacking Romans inward. Drawn by the illusion of victory, a Roman soldier steps deeper into the swirling dust cloud, unknowingly walking directly into an elaborate trap. The entire Roman army acts like water, rushing into a valley, pouring its massive, concentrated weight into the bending Carthaginian bowl. The physical toll on the retreating Carthaginians is immense, their trembling muscles forced to absorb the forward momentum of 80,000 men. Because of their sheer density, the legionaries on the extreme left and right are naturally funneled inward, violently compressing their own front lines. The dust cloud thickens over the compressed center, turning the bright midday sunlight into an eerie, suffocating, and glowing orange haze. Pushed violently by the eager troops behind him, A Roman standard-bearer struggles to keep the heavy golden eagle upright in the crush, hidden completely by the dust on the far edges of the field. The elite Libyan heavy infantry wait in absolute, terrifying silence. Standing in perfectly disciplined ranks, these veteran spearmen watch the massive Roman army blindly walk right past their concealed flank positions. A Libyan warrior grips the smooth wood of his spear, his knuckles turning white with anticipation, as the roar of the Roman center echoes. From high above, the sheer brilliance of the trap is revealed, as the Romans willingly wedge themselves inside a three-sided Carthaginian pocket. On the far wings, the shattered Roman cavalry turns and flees, chased completely off the battlefield by the victorious Carthaginian riders. Without hesitation, Hasdrubal wheels his heavy cavalry around in a massive, sweeping arc, locking his sights on the completely unprotected Roman rear. A Roman tribune glances nervously toward the flank as the dust clears slightly, his triumphant smile melting into sudden, profound confusion. On the edges of the battlefield, the Libyan commanders draw their swords in unison, pointing their blades directly at the exposed Roman flanks. Moving with flawless, terrifying synchronization, the entire line of hidden Libyan infantry pivots inward, lowering a pristine wall of sharp steel spears. The Libyans march forward with mechanical precision, rapidly closing the gap on the blind sides of the completely oblivious Roman war machine. Sunlight flashes fiercely across the descending spear tips as they thrust violently forward, striking the completely unprotected flanks of the Roman bloc. A Roman soldier on the edge turns his head just in time to witness the impenetrable wall of Libyan shields crashing into his side. The sudden, devastating impact on the flanks sends a massive shockwave of stoppage, rippling instantly through the entire Roman formation. Soldiers on the outer edges are violently forced backward into their own comrades, instantly destroying any remaining forward momentum the Romans possessed. Deep inside the Roman center, the eager advance stops dead, replaced by a sudden, terrifying standstill as unbearable pressure builds from the sides. The sky above is swallowed by a swirling vortex of blinding dust, casting a dark, claustrophobic shadow over the suddenly paralyzed army. Panic ripples through the Roman backline as soldiers turn around, witnessing Hasdrubal's heavy cavalry thundering directly toward their exposed and vulnerable rear. The massive Carthaginian war horses slam into the back of the Roman formation, acting as an impenetrable iron door that slams definitively shut. From a bird's-eye view, the final, flawless connection of Hannibal's forces is made, creating an unbroken ring around the entire Roman army. In the center of the suffocating crush, the horrible realization of full encirclement dawns in the wide, panicked eyes of a Roman commander. Pushed relentlessly from every direction, Roman shields are jammed helplessly against one another, the painted wood groaning and cracking under the incredible strain. The compression is so absolute that men are packed tightly, shoulder to shoulder, entirely unable to even raise their swords in defense. A legionary struggles merely to draw breath, his heavy chest plate pressed completely flat against the back of the soldier in front of him. Rising above the chaotic crush, the terrifying, inescapable geometry of Hannibal's perfect circle becomes clear, an architectural masterpiece built of human lives. The Carthaginian center, which had retreated for hours, now aggressively surges forward, completing the overwhelming compression from the front lines. Hannibal watches his masterpiece unfold from the front line, his face a mask of solemn, chilling calm as the ultimate trap is sprung. The Libyan spearmen methodically step forward, their weapons thrusting in rhythmic, unified motions as they slowly and deliberately tighten the fatal circle. From deep inside the trapped Roman mass, there is nothing to see but an impenetrable wall of hostile shields and spears closing in. An exhausted Roman drops his sword into the dust, the crushing sea of bodies preventing him from ever reaching down to retrieve it. At the rear, the Carthaginian heavy cavalry sit like statues, their long lances keeping the desperate Roman soldiers completely and utterly boxed in. The swirling dust cloud acts as a suffocating, heavy blanket over the encircled Romans, illuminated only by harsh, blinding shafts of midday sunlight. A revered Roman eagle standard leans precariously to the side, drowning in a dense, shifting sea of trapped helmets and hopelessly tangled shields. Circling the outer perimeter, the Carthaginian troops display relentless, organized discipline, holding an unbroken line against the sheer mass of the trapped army. Spinning slowly above the encirclement, the drone reveals 80,000 trapped men moving, not as an army, but as a single, struggling organism. A Celtic warrior screams a fierce battle cry into the blowing dust, locking his heavy shield firmly in place against the desperate Roman push. From a distant, silent hill, the battle appears merely as a massive, swirling storm of dust and flashing metal on the golden plain. A Roman desperately pushes his bare hands against a Libyan shield, but the overwhelming, unified pressure, slowly and inevitably, forces him backward. A profound psychological breakdown sweeps through the trapped Roman ranks, as triumphant eagerness is replaced by exhaustion, sheer terror, and absolute disbelief. A cohort attempts to raise their shields into a defensive formation, but the crushing weight of their own men makes movement entirely impossible. The reflection of the trapped, doomed Roman army is caught briefly in the polished bronze of an unyielding Carthaginian shield on the perimeter. The unforgiving sun beats down upon the mass, creating fierce heat waves that ripple above the tightly packed helmets of the exhausted legionaries. The absolute futility of Roman numbers is realized, as their massive depth only serves to crush them tighter within the shrinking enemy ring. The faces of the Carthaginian perimeter guards display a focused, methodical determination, keeping their shield wall perfectly intact against the desperate surge. Down on the loose earth, the heavy boots of the Roman soldiers shuffle helplessly in place, completely devoid of anywhere left to step. A broken Roman spear lies forgotten in the thick dust, heavily trampled by the shifting, sliding boots of a paralyzed and trapped army. Descending rapidly toward the center, the sheer claustrophobia of the shrinking pocket is terrifying, as all space is systematically erased by the enemy. A seasoned centurion screams desperate orders, but his voice is completely swallowed by the deafening roar of grinding metal and the howling wind. The Volturnus wind blows with renewed violence, casting a blinding, suffocating veil of yellow dust directly into the faces of the trapped Romans. On the periphery, a Numidian horseman watches the encirclement with quiet awe, his light javelin resting easily as the trap does the work. Pushing through the Carthaginian backlines, commanders calmly organize reinforcements, ensuring that not a single gap opens in the perfect, unbroken circular wall. The golden Roman eagle standard finally slips from view, sinking slowly and inevitably beneath a crushing sea of heavily compressed bronze helmets. A Carthaginian sword rhythmically strikes the edge of a shield, a slow, terrifying drumbeat that echoes like a countdown around the trapped Romans. Having narrowly escaped on the far periphery, Consul Varro looks back in sheer, unadulterated horror at the total entrapment of his entire army. The Carthaginian heavy cavalry sit stoically atop their exhausted mounts, forming an immovable iron wall that seals the rear of the fatal trap. In sheer exhaustion, a Roman soldier closes his eyes, leaning his full body weight against his shield, for there is absolutely no room to fall. Circling the shrinking pocket, it becomes visually undeniable how a smaller, brilliantly commanded army has entirely swallowed a force twice its immense size. Hannibal rides slowly along the quiet outside of the encirclement, his purple cloak catching the wind as he surveys his completed tactical masterpiece. The afternoon sun frames Hannibal like a divine halo, while the relentless Apulian dust swirls violently around the strong legs of his great horse. The interlocking Carthaginian shields on the front line hold their ground, an unyielding, seamless fortress wall built of wood, thick leather, and bronze. The magnificent Roman legions lose all formation, dissolving entirely from a disciplined army into a desperate, swirling mob, trapped in an inescapable cage. Beneath the harsh, blinding sun, the suffocating interior of the Roman trap becomes an agonizing furnace of inescapable heat and unimaginable physical pressure. A single drop of sweat falls slowly from a Roman soldier's chin, striking the dusty bronze of his crushed chest plate in complete silence.
The massive, terrifying Roman rectangle has been entirely erased, forcefully dissolved by Hannibal's genius into a tight, struggling, and highly irregular circle.
Libyan spearmen maintain perfect, terrifying posture, their unwavering discipline holding the absolute perimeter of the battlefield without a single step out of line. Discarded Roman shields become little more than stepping stones, heavily trampled into the dry dirt under the immense pressure of the shifting crowd. A Celtic warrior heaves a tired but resolute breath, his muscles aching as he holds his vital position against the incredible trapped weight. As the late afternoon sun begins to lower, incredibly long, dramatic shadows of the victorious Carthaginian troops stretch deeply across the dusty battlefield. The blowing dust slowly begins to settle as the frantic movement of the trapped Roman army grinds to an exhausted, immobile, and silent standstill. A dented Roman helmet falls slowly to the ground, bouncing once in the thick dust before settling perfectly still upon the quiet earth. A proud Carthaginian standard flutters sharply in the wind, standing perfectly in focus against the blurred, tragic backdrop of the completely encircled Romans. Pulling higher into the sky, the true, terrifying isolation of the encirclement is revealed against the vast, empty expanse of the dry Apulian plain. The golden hour light washes gently over the battlefield, turning the swirling dust into a glowing, ethereal mist that gracefully blankets the ruined armies. On an empty section of the plain, the wind softly breezes past discarded Roman javelins and the scattered remnants of a truly broken vanguard. An intricately painted Carthaginian shield rests quietly on the ground as the whispering wind gradually replaces the fading, chaotic roar of the battle. The golden sun dips toward the horizon, its warm, dying light catching the polished edges of 1,000 stationary Carthaginian spears holding firm. In the quiet, golden light of the late afternoon, the exhausted but victorious faces of Hannibal's troops finally take a moment to breathe. The Aufidus River flows gently in the background, entirely undisturbed, a serene contrast to the monumental tactical annihilation that occurred upon its banks. Moving slowly past abandoned Roman armor, the sheer, staggering scale of the equipment left behind by the trapped army tells a silent, haunting story. A single blade of dry grass stands tall in the evening wind, framed against the distant, blurred silhouette of the unbroken Carthaginian circle. Hannibal Barca sits quietly atop his horse in the dying sunlight, staring solemnly over the plain in silent reflection of his truly impossible victory. As the sun sets, the dust finally clears, transforming the violent battlefield back into the serene, quiet emptiness of the ancient Italian landscape. A Carthaginian soldier slowly lowers his heavy shield, his shoulders dropping in a wave of deep physical relief as the historic day concludes. Gliding low over the dry earth, the fading light catches the last golden glints reflecting off scattered helmets and the shattered wooden spears. From above, the battlefield fades smoothly into a glowing golden topographical map of Cannae, perfectly illustrating the historical masterpiece of the double envelopment. Glowing tactical lines trace themselves across the map, visually cementing the flawless perfection of Hannibal's crescent withdrawal and his devastating cavalry envelopment. The golden map slowly dissolves back into the dark, sweeping landscape, leaving only the quiet, empty Apulian plain resting beneath a calm twilight sky. A gentle wind blows across the dark horizon beneath a canopy of stars, keeping the eternal silent secrets of Cannae forever in the dust.